minutes remaining for questions and comments for the honourable member for Gatineau when the House comes back to this motion. Now, statements by members.
The
honourable member for Richmond-Athabasca. Mr. Speaker, the Conservative government is still being lax in terms of genetically modified foods, and the recent decision of the U.S. Agriculture Department is reigniting the concerns of consumers and farm producers in Quebec. The Americans have just approved 2 types of genetically modified apples that will be marketed here within 5 years, and they don't turn brown, but natural apples don't turn brown either. According to a poll conducted on close to 1,500 Canadians, 69% of people are against the marketing of genetically modified apples here. In addition, 91% are calling for mandatory labeling of GMOs. The Quebec Apple Producer Federation has said that it is concerned and is opposed to the marketing of genetically modified apples here because it believes that consumers are concerned and that this could have a negative impact on the consumption and marketing of apples in Canada. The government must stand firm, ban the marketing of genetically modified apples, and make labeling of GMOs mandatory as the public and producers are calling for. Thank you.
Embassy. Lieutenant Colonel Van Damme in his presentation spoke of the French nation's desire to honour young Canadians who left their homes and careers to bring freedom to France. The medal is but a small token of our continuing gratitude to those Canadians, he declared. While joining the Canadian Army in 1942 as a corporal craftsman with the Royal Canadian Electrical Mechanical Engineers, he helped liberate France, Belgium, and Holland from the Nazis. Wanamaker was in the Advanced Recovery Unit, salvaging damaged vehicles so they could be repaired and returned to action or destroyed. He is still a member of the Bancroft Legion, and for his work he has received both a Certificate of Merit and a National Meritorious Service Medal. To his family and friends, we honour Corporal Wanamaker, now a French knight, as well as a beloved native son.
The Honourable Member for Gatineau. Today, the United Nations is inviting us to commemorate the World Day of Social Justice. But this concept has been undermined in Canada for decades, both by Liberals and Conservatives, to the detriment of the middle class, whose buying power is being eroded by inflation, while the federal government continually slashes their services. A certain Prime Minister even promised Canadians a just society ages ago. Further to the failure of his project, a journalist asked him what was happening with this project. Trudeau Sr. said, "Ask Jesus Christ, he promised it first." How cynical. The Liberal and Conservative governments are racing to the bottom, breaking trust with the Canadians and stiffening with the bill. But this will inevitably lead to its undoing. As the old adage said, who sows the wind reaps the whirlwind. Social justice must be a priority for all governments. That is one of the NDP's founding principles, and we will never renege on our promise to ensure greater social justice for all. Honourable Member for Lobinière-Chaudière. Mr. Speaker, this week we celebrated the week of student retention in Quebec to educate us and mobilize us to become committed to our young people throughout their academic life. The goal of this week is not only to improve student retention, but to increase the number of young people who go on to higher education. It is always a privilege as a Member of Parliament to see how proud and dedicated these young people are, and I congratulate them each year during their graduation ceremonies. Today's young people are tomorrow's workers, and anything we can do to help them is a step in the right direction. I would like to commend the exceptional work done by all organizations in Lobinière-Chaudière, as well as those of partner networks in Quebec who held numerous activities to encourage our young people to persevere, succeed, and continue to believe in the development of their full potential. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Mount Royal.
Mr. Speaker, recently I addressed the first ever United Nations General Assembly meeting on anti-Semitism, which took place symbolically and significantly on International Holocaust Remembrance Day. It was also the 70th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, the most brutal extermination camp of the 20th century, reminding us of horrors too terrible to be believed, but not too terrible to have happened. 1.3 million people were murdered at Auschwitz. 1.1 million of them were Jews. Let there be no mistake about it. Jews died at Auschwitz because of anti-Semitism, but anti-Semitism did not die. Indeed, we have been witness to an escalation and intensification of this oldest, most enduring, and particularly toxic hatred, reminding us that while it begins with Jews, it may not end with Jews, that anti-Semitism is a canary in the mineshaft of evil. I am pleased, therefore, that in response to the UN appeal to member parliaments, we will be holding a take-note debate on anti-Semitism on Tuesday evening. It is timely, necessary, and urgent that we sound the parliamentary alarm on this global evil. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Saskatoon, Rosetown Bigger.
Mr. Speaker, freedom of religion is a value that Canadians hold dear. Sadly, there are some people, businesses, and even law societies that are opposing this value. Citing Trinity Western University's Student Code of Conduct, they say that either Trinity should not be allowed to have a law school or that Trinity graduates should not be allowed to practice law. Mr. Speaker, the Supreme Court of Canada has already ruled that Trinity's Student Code of Conduct does not constitute discrimination. Absolutely. Thankfully, a ruling by the Supreme Court of Nova Scotia has brought some common sense to this most recent debate. Last month, Justice Jamie Campbell dismissed a decision by the Nova Scotia Barristers Society to deny future Trinity Law School graduates the right to practice law. I call on all opponents, Mr. Speaker, of Trinity Western University's future law school to withdraw their opposition and support the important Canadian value of freedom of religion.
Alfred Pellan.
Honourable Member for Alfred Pellan. I am proud to rise today in this House to underscore a very special anniversary on the part of people from Laval, the 50th anniversary of the City of Laval. In 1965, the 14 municipalities of Jésus Island decided to merge to form one city, Laval. 50 years later, the third largest city in Quebec has a diversified and prosperous economy, in addition to being a primary choice for seniors and young families to live there. Throughout the year, a vast program of festivities takes place, and many people have enjoy living in their different neighborhoods because of their diversified base. I would like to raise my hat to the Corporation of 2015 celebrations in Laval, the Mayor of Laval, the municipal elected officials, and the citizens who have devoted themselves to these projects. Your dedication shows that together we can accomplish great things. Happy 50th anniversary to all Laval citizens.
The honourable member for Brampton-Springdale.
Mr. Speaker, I recently attended a town hall meeting in Brampton where parents were outraged with the Liberal Party policies which attacks our family values. Liberals want to legalize marijuana, making it more accessible to our children. They want to legalize prostitution in our streets and in our neighbourhoods. And now in Ontario, Mr. Speaker, Liberals are determined to introduce new sex ed curriculum, a graphic and explicit sex education for children starting in grade 1. As a father of 3, I share the concerns of many of my constituents that these policies are dangerous and exposes young children to sexually explicit behavior and teaches concepts and practices that parents consider offensive and morally questionable. The Liberals need to stop attacking our family values and instead focus on teaching our kids a curriculum that reflects the beliefs of parents. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for North Vancouver.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise to bring attention to issues that affect people worldwide: clean water and proper sanitation. Currently, 2.5 billion people lack access to toilets, something that is hard for many of us here to even imagine. Last September, I met with India's Prime Minister Modi when I took part in the Global Citizen Festival, hosted by the Global Poverty Project. PM Modi spoke passionately about the great effort his country is making to assure that all Indians have access to proper sanitation, made famous by his Toilets Before Temples campaign. Increasing access to and usage of toilets will not only reduce the daily death toll of some 2,000 young lives worldwide caused by sanitation-related diseases, but will also make schools a more welcoming place for girls, many of whom don't attend for this very reason. For every dollar invested in safe drinking water and sanitation, there is about $4 saved in work time productivity and healthcare costs in developing countries. Let's work together towards sustainable development goals for the health and safety of all people worldwide.
Honourable Member for Laval. Throughout the month of February, we celebrate Black History Month. a story that was written in pain, but also in courage, hope, and resiliency. Black people have contributed to build America, where we live, and Canada, that we share, by the sweat of their brow and their blood. They stood up, shoulder to shoulder, to fight discrimination and the violation of their rights. Despite great progress, we still have much work to do. Exclusion is unfortunately too present even today in our societies and in spheres that one might not suspect. I am proud to be the mouthpiece for the minorities in my riding of Laval for their involvement in economic, political, and social cultural life. I would like to pay posthumous tribute to Althea Joseph Charles Seaman of the Black Community Association, who passed away in fall 2013, and recognize Dr. Alex Ray, who has taken over her task. Let us celebrate the 24th edition of Laval Black History Month. Defend your convictions.
The honourable member for Etobicoke Lakeshore.
Mr. Speaker, 1 year ago today in the Maidan, Kiev, a peaceful protest was turned into a massacre. Over 3 days, up to 100 people were shot dead by then-President Yanukovych's security forces. Yanukovych later fled the country and his government collapsed, but that was only the beginning. Since then, Russia has stoked conflict in eastern Ukraine. This conflict has claimed more than 5,000 lives. Our government stands firmly behind the people of Ukraine. We have stated clearly, loudly, and often, this conflict will only end when Russia halts its invasion, withdraws its armed forces, and stops supporting these so-called rebels. This is why we have made significant military contributions to NATO's Ukrainian reassurance measures, why our economic sanctions regime against powerful Russian individuals is the strongest in the world, and why we have announced over $515 million in assistance since the killing of protesters took place over 1 year ago. On behalf of my constituents in Etobicoke Lakeshore, I want to be clear to the Ukrainian people on this anniversary, you have a friend in Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Beauharnois-Salaberry. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Small businesses are at the basis of our economy. In my riding of Beauharnois-Salaberry, 89% of businesses are small or medium-sized, which is over 2,000 firms that create jobs and wealth at the local level, whether it be in the farm area, food processing, chemicals, computers, restaurants, or tourism. Our business people take risks, innovate, and export their products. And first and foremost, they provide jobs to people locally. So why shouldn't we support them? Why is the federal government abandoned the retail and manufacturing sectors in favor of oil companies? The government is putting all its eggs in the same basket. This disastrous economic mismanagement has harmed our businesses, which are closing their doors in Valleyfield, Beauharnois, Ormstown, and Les Jardins de Napierville. This has to stop. The next NDP government will not abandon SMEs. With an innovation tax credit and a tax cut of 11 to 9%, we will give priority to business people here.
Shore St. Margaret's.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians expect their government to create jobs and grow the economy. Canada is blessed with an immense amount of natural resources which provide opportunities from coast to coast to coast. And our government's responsible resource development plan has led to action on Canada's already impressive world-class safety systems for the transportation of our energy products. But, Mr. Speaker, while our government makes decisions based on independent, science-based review, the Liberal Party opposes resource development before the regulatory review has even been completed. Why does the leader of the Liberal Party insist on putting ideology before science and facts when he said the Energy East oil pipeline is not socially acceptable? Mr. Speaker, that statement is unacceptable. And our message is clear. We will stand up for Canadians' interest at home as well as abroad and continue to create jobs, growth, and opportunity for all Canadians.
Honourable member for Etobicoke North.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to celebrate the extraordinary Mary Harker, who was tireless in her commitment to helping others, making the world a better place, and welcoming everyone with open arms. Mary was legendary in Etobicoke, having worked with mayors, MPPs, and MPs. She started the Nightgown Brigade and would rush to help women escaping violent situations no matter what time of night. She served on Albion Neighbourhood Services Youth Without Shelter, helped found Ernestine's Women's Shelter, gave 4 decades to Rexdale Legal Clinic, and served for decades on the Community Police Liaison Committee. The community loved Mary and recognized her thousands of hours of volunteer service with numerous awards. Mary is now with her beloved husband, Ron, and leaves behind daughters Kathy and Wendy, their partners Scott and Peter, and her grandchildren Matthew, Cameron, and Madeline. We thank you for sharing her with us. We owe you a debt of gratitude.
The honourable member for London North Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While the NDP wants to impose a job-killing carbon tax and the Liberal leader encourages his provincial comrades to do the same, this Conservative government is delivering the largest tax break in Canadian history. Under this plan, 100% of families with children will have more money in their pockets to spend on their priorities as a family. And in my riding of London North Centre, families are excited about this. Through all the new tax breaks, the average benefit of each of these families will be more than $1,100. Mr. Speaker, we assured Canadians that we would lower taxes and put more of their hard-earned money back in their pockets. And that is exactly what we are doing and what we will continue to do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Pierrefonds-Dollard. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives shocked people when they sent their fundraising email mentioning that they are opposed to the wearing of the hijab during the oath of citizenship. It's one thing for the Minister of Citizenship to attack Muslim women who cover their faces, but for him to confuse hijab, niqab, and burqa for the sole purpose of misleading people and fear-mongering is beyond belief. Obviously, he could simply have indicated that he had used the wrong term, but no, he preferred to say that the hijab is not permitted, whereas it is permitted at the oath of citizenship. In fact, this minister would rather use wedge politics and fearmonger for political purposes. Mr. Speaker, the same goes for C-51. They are taking advantage of the current situation to mislead the public by claiming that it does not grant increased powers to security forces. Canadians deserve better. They deserve leaders who tell the truth and who do not exploit wedge politics for political purposes.
Member for Okanagan, Coquihalla.
Mr. Speaker, thanks to our new family tax cut and enhanced universal child care benefit, 100% of families with children will be better off. The average family with children in Canada will now receive just under $2,000 per child. The difference between our priorities and those of the opposition are very clear. While we are giving back to Canadian families, the opposition would take money away from families. While we are cutting taxes, the Liberal leader would raise taxes. While our plan helps out 100% of Canadian families with kids, the NDP plan would help only 10% of families. Mr. Speaker, our family tax cut and enhanced universal child care benefit will help every family in Canada with children. That's over 4 million families. Only this Conservative government can be trusted to put more money back into the pockets of each and every family with children in Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oral questions. Question orale. The honourable member for Halifax.
5 former justices of the Supreme Court, 7 former federal ministers, 4 former prime ministers, including a Conservative, have all said they're concerned about the dangers that C-51 represents. This bill risks undermining public protection and human rights. There is no effective oversight mechanism for monitoring CSIS. Why are the minister and the Liberal leader not listening to this wise advice? The Honourable Minister of Justice.
The reality is, I thank my friend from Halifax for the question. The reality is that there is, in fact, oversight. There's already oversight with CERC. This bill is also very cognizant of the fact that judicial oversight is necessary for the acting upon some of the intelligence that will be gathered by our security agencies. There is oversight with respect to the bill itself as it makes its way through the parliamentary process. There will be expert evidence heard, I'm sure, at committee, Mr. Speaker, and we look forward to the further participation in this important debate aimed specifically at addressing security needs in our country in this elevated environment.
The honourable member for Halifax.
Mr. Speaker, the minister should listen to the advice of these prime ministers and Supreme Court justices because they warn, quote, experience has shown that serious human rights abuses can occur in the name of maintaining national security. They recognize that our current oversight regime is wholly inadequate. And in fact, our oversight is so lacking that it's uniting Liberal and Conservative prime ministers. Why are Conservatives turning a deaf ear on such reasonable concerns?
Honourable Minister of Justice.
Well, I think that the one individual she's referencing kind of united with himself a long time ago, Mr. Speaker. Oversight with respect to judges is something that I think all members present would be quick to embrace. The fact that these extraordinary powers, though they might be, are necessary in the current threat environment. And that judicial oversight which comes at the front end of the process, Mr. Speaker, as opposed to what is being suggested by members opposite, which would be political oversight after the fact, we think is preferable.
Member for Halifax.
So in short, the minister is dismissing reasonable concerns for no reason at all. Well, Mr. Speaker, no one should face profiling or live under a cloud of suspicion because of their faith. Yet the Prime Minister and the Conservatives have repeatedly targeted Muslims. They're creating anger and they're feeding division. In contrast, American President Barack Obama is reaching out to Muslims. He's looking to them as partners in the fight against radicalization. Will the Prime Minister apologize for his offensive comments towards Muslim Canadians?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that is so completely untrue and completely offensive and completely far off base when it comes to what we are attempting to do as a government through this legislation to enhance safety, protection and security for all Canadians, Mr. Speaker. Security does not discriminate. We are attempting to elevate the security of our country from a very real and evolving threat. The member opposite decides throughout this debate to somehow scare police about what the security forces are doing rather than what the terrorists are posing as a threat to our country.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Lambert. Mr. Speaker, we learned this morning that the Conservatives' blind cutbacks and their bad priorities have had negative consequences on the fight against child pornography. Whereas this number of sordid cases are proliferating, the Conservatives have tried to save $10 million on the backs of victims. Every year, 40,000 accusations are received, but the RCMP doesn't have the necessary resources to investigate every case. Why has the minister taken $10 million allocated to the fight against sexual predators and child pornography? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
That is absolutely false. That member should not let the CBC do the research for them. In fact, and let me be clear, no funding for the protection of children from sexual predators has been cut. The RCMP did not spend the full budget allocated to the National Child Exploitation Coordination Centre due to human resource challenges stemming from the nature of work, and I think you can imagine the nature of work involved here, and high qualification standards. That remark was absolutely false.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Lambert. Mr. Speaker, it's not just investigations of child pornography that are the victim of the Conservatives' devious cutbacks. A new report has revealed that for the last 8 years, 20% of the funds allocated to the RCMP have been returned to the Treasury. The Commissioner of the RCMP admits that these cutbacks affect the fight against organized crime in particular. How can the Conservatives claim that the security of Canadians is a priority, whereas they misappropriate funds intended for the RCMP? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, that question coming from that member just shows how they cannot be trusted with this country's finances. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the previous Liberal government lapsed over $3 billion from these agencies. The member opposite is simply trying to play politics over an accounting issue. Mr. Speaker, what is really the truth here is that 7 times our Conservative government brought forward new resources to fight terrorism. And the truth of all of this is 7 times the NDP and the Liberals voted against them.
The Honourable Member for Ottawa South.
Mr. Speaker, experts' forecasts on the subject of GDP growth are decreasing every month. Job creation is stagnating, and we have 2 provinces that are headed towards a recession. The Conservatives react by cutting infrastructure programs by 90%, a program that guarantees job creation and future prosperity. Even worse, The minister has pushed the budget back until May and says that no immediate action is necessary. Why are the Conservatives dealing with the economy in such an irresponsible manner?
Parliament Secretary for Finance.
Mr. Speaker, our government has a low-tax plan for jobs and growth for all sectors of the Canadian economy that is working and will return Canada to a balanced budget this year. While we're focused on creating jobs, the Liberal leader has the same old Liberal high-tax, high-debt agenda that will threaten jobs and set working families back. Mr. Speaker, we are proud of our plan that is lowering taxes and providing benefits directly to families for them to reinvest in the Canadian economy. In contrast, the Liberal leader is looking at reversing the doubling of the children's fitness tax credit and even said that he would convince Canadians to accept a tax hike.
And he thinks the budget. The honourable member for Wascana.
Mr. Speaker, this government just drives by all the worries of Canada's middle class and all those who are working so hard just to get there. Their earnings are stagnant, but their debt has ballooned to 164% of disposable incomes. 3/4 don't have a pension. In 40% of empty nester households, their adult children have moved back home. Their expectations of progress, of upward mobility from one generation to the next are frustrated. So why is this government's only priority an income-splitting tax break that will pay the most to those earning $233,000?
The Honourable Minister of Employment and Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, the member's question is absolutely false. According to, let me quote a headline right out of the New York Times, Canadian median incomes among the highest in the world. That was the same report in which they found that for the first time, the Canadian middle class is actually wealthier than the American middle class, a situation that was reversed under the previous Liberal government. Our low tax plan for families will help 100% of families with kids, on average $1,000 per household. The only plan that the Liberal Party has is to raise taxes on middle-class families. That will drive jobs down and poverty up.
Honourable member for Wascana.
Well, the New York Times story said the situation was the U.S. economy had fallen back, not that the Canadian economy had moved forward. The late Jim Flaherty said that income splitting is too expensive, $12 billion over the planning cycle. He also said it's unfair because 86% of Canadians can never qualify. It worsens inequality. It does nothing for growth. Will the government at least use this budget hiatus to do two things? Recycle that $12 billion into the pockets of real middle-class families, not those at $233,000, and invest in municipal infrastructure to drive jobs and growth.
Honourable Minister of Employment and Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, the reality is that the family tax cut applies to families at all income levels, and the Liberal plan to reverse it will raise taxes on working and low-income families, Mr. Speaker. That will kill jobs, it will imperil our economy, and it will drive up poverty. The fact is, under the low-tax plan we've introduced, according to UNICEF, during the recession, 180,000 children were lifted out of poverty, which shows that when you put dollars directly in the pockets of mom and dad, they always do the right thing, they always lift themselves up, and they bring their children with them.
Honourable member for Burnaby New Westminster.
It's now obvious that the Conservatives never had any intention of truly debating Bill C-51. As soon as it started, the debate was cut short. Only a few hours of debate, whereas we are talking about the security and fundamental freedoms of Canadians. It is ridiculous, Mr. Speaker. Why is the government trying to sweep the debate under the carpet? Why the steamroller tactics? What do they have to hide from Canadians? The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, let's look at this in the current context of things. This is a bill that is aimed specifically at protecting Canadians from the evolving threat of terrorism. One only needs to turn on the nightly news to see what's happening around the world and what has in fact happened here in our own country. We will have debate in this House. This bill will move before a committee where we'll hear from experts on the subject of terrorism, but we want, on behalf of Canadians, to put more tools in the hands of our police to allow them to protect our country with proper oversight.
Honourable member for Burnaby New Westminster.
The irony, of course, is Conservatives would actually benefit the most from more debate on this bill, since there seems to be so much confusion among their ministers about what is actually in it. Now, the Minister for National Defence claims that C-51, and I quote, doesn't give new powers to police or intelligence agencies. Now, if he hasn't read the bill, I can assure him that C-51 dramatically expands CSIS's powers, and it's CSIS that decides whether any judicial approval is ever needed. Now, does this government understand the consequences of the bill they've tabled, and why are they trying to ram through a bill that they obviously don't understand?
Honourable Minister of Justice.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we understand full well that over 80% of Canadians support these new measures. We understand full well that these are practical, common-sense measures designed to give police greater ability to protect Canadians in our communities through measures that are thoroughly requiring judicial oversight, through measures that will be given ample opportunity to be reviewed by this Parliament, Mr. Speaker. But the reality is that we have a pressing need to bring forward these measures. There will be debate in this House. There will be scrutiny at committee, Mr. Speaker. There will be testimony of expert witnesses to give their perspective on this important bill. But, Mr. Speaker, we need this bill now.
Honourable member for Alfred Pellan.
Terrorism has sidelined other critical public safety priorities. Shockingly, even child pornography investigations are being systematically underfunded. Over the last 5 years, the RCMP withheld $10 million in funds from child exploitation projects. Why? Conservatives say it's to reduce the deficit. Does the minister find it acceptable to balance the books by cutting back on resources set aside to stop child sexual exploitation?
Parliament Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you. Once again, absolutely false. I will say it one more time to be perfectly clear. Perhaps the opposition should hear it this time. No funding for protecting children from sexual predators has been cut. And I'm just going to quote something from the report. Mr. Speaker, because we talk about the importance of finding qualified people to deal in this area with regards to child pornography, sexual exploitation. It's a very difficult field and very difficult on the law enforcement people who get involved. And this is one of the reasons why. And it basically, in the report, it speaks online sexual exploitation in particular because it is psychologically demanding field of law enforcement specialization.
Honourable member for Alfred Pellan. Let's be serious, Mr. Speaker. The phone line receives 40,000 calls a year for accusations. These are cases of children being sexually exploited. This can't be put on the shelf. There has to be a follow-up. They have to get these children out of these situations as quickly as possible. So what is the minister's plan to ensure the safety of all of our children? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to give you an example of the good work that the National Child Exploitation Coordination Centre does. In 2014, in a coordinated project, 5 children were removed from harm and 150 individuals were arrested. Wow. This investigation involved the seizure of over 2 million images. If you can imagine the impact that this has on the people that work in this area, and these videos were seized from several hundred different computers. But it's remarkable that these types of questions come from the NDP when they actually voted against creating tough new sentences for child exploitation and also against the tougher penalties for Child Predators Act. Shameful.
The Honourable Member for Gatineau.
Bills when there are standalone bills, not when they're in omnibus bills.
Whereas the government is about to radically expand CSIS and the RCMP's powers, we can see that these agencies are in precarious financial situations. The government can pass all the new laws they want, but there is no point if they don't have the staff and resources to enforce them. How does the minister explain the $1.7 billion that were not spent by the RCMP over the last 8 years? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
We have increased funding for our security agencies since we took office in 2006. Unfortunately, when it comes to protecting our citizens, the opposition parties have voted against every single increase in resources. As I stated in an earlier thing as well, the previous Liberal government actually lapsed over $3 billion from these agencies. This is a normal practice, and I wish that they would stop playing political games with such an important issue.
Honourable Member for Gatineau.
Political games. And another definition, they have no idea what it means. Well, you would think that the government would at least listen to its own friends. As former Ottawa police chief and
Order. L'honorable député de...
The Honourable Member.
Order. L'honorable député de...
The Honourable Member for Gatineau has the floor.
Want to hear the question. So we need to recognize that honourable members have the floor. They need the courtesy of being heard. L'honorable député de Gatineau.
The Honourable Member for Gatineau. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Government would at least listen to its own friends, and they don't have many. As former Ottawa police chief and Conservative Vern White said, quote, "What I am hearing from police agencies is that the amount of resources having to be pushed into counter-terrorism work right now means there's other work not getting done. In particular, organized crime investigations. Remember, that still exists. I'm not sure we can afford to do that. Mr. Speaker, I am not sure either. Can the minister explain to us why they made cuts to public safety?"
Hear, hear.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
The opposition has not heard clearly. That is absolutely false. In fact, our government has increased spending to our security agencies by 1/3. It's a common practice that when you create budgets for departments, if they don't spend that budget, it's either rolled over or it's returned back to the government. Mr. Speaker, I find it completely unacceptable that we have a party across the way that has voted essentially against every single measure to get tough on crime, to fight terrorism and to protect our children, and then they have the audacity to stand in this House and bring up these types of issues.
The Honourable Member for Beauharnois-Salaberry. Even if the Conservatives have been harshly criticized for their partisan ads paid for with public funds, now they are injecting another $11 million into pure propaganda. A few months away from the elections, no one is fooled. This is crass self-promotion paid for by taxpayers. Rather than squandering $65 million in pure propaganda, why don't the Conservatives invest in our social programs and other priorities of Canadians?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, recruitment, training and retention are key priorities for the Canadian Armed Forces. The new recruitment advertising campaign is part of our commitment to support our troops in the Canadian Armed Forces. The Canadian Armed Forces recruited approximately 4,500 regular force personnel last year alone. We are proud of our men and women in uniform, so our Canadians and public opinion research shows that 90% of Canadians have a positive impression of members of the Canadian Armed Forces, up from 78% in 1999. Following a decade of darkness under the Liberals, we have increased the defence budget by over 27%, and we're not going to make any apologies for doing that.
Honourable Member for Nanaimo, Cowichan.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's clear to everyone that one of the government's main priorities is advertising before the next election. $11 million more in additional advertising is more than double what it would cost to keep the Veterans Affairs offices open, and it's the average old age security benefits for almost 1,800 seniors. How can Conservatives justify spending millions more in publicly funded partisan advertising just before an election while cutting help to seniors and veterans?
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to remind the member that it is important that we advertise and continue to recruit for the Canadian Armed Forces, and that's what this advertising is all about, is to maintain and increase capabilities of the proud men and women who serve us day in and day out and stand on the wall and protect our nation, as well as carry out dangerous missions around the world. And, to her comment about Veterans Affairs offices, got a reminder that we now have over 600 new points of service for our veterans across this country. We can indeed do both, recruit and provide services right across this great country.
The Honourable Member for Rimouski-Néjatin-Misquota-Les-Basques. We've learned, Mr. Speaker, that more than 400 Canadian individuals and businesses, amongst the wealthiest of our society, have secret bank accounts with HSBC in Geneva. Honest citizens who pay their taxes are exasperated by the government's lack of action on this issue. Yesterday, at the Finance Committee, the Conservatives voted down our motion to get to the bottom of this tax avoidance strategy. Why does the government refuse to work with us to fight against white-collar criminals who benefit from tax havens? The Honourable Minister.
This government has zero tolerance for tax evasion. The CRA received 1,349 files from France related to HSBC. Of those files received, 154 were duplicates, 801 contained $0, and 394 were deemed high-risk or high-dollar files. Where non-compliance was expected, the CRA conducted hundreds of audits, leading to $21 million in taxes and penalties being reassessed. This work is ongoing. Further, the CRA has received over 250 voluntary disclosures, identifying 123 million undisclosed amounts.
York West.
Mr. Speaker, nothing is more important than protecting our children. I believe we all agree to that. But the Conservatives have chosen to use $10 million from the fund the RCMP uses to fight child pornography. This is the same government that just has spent $2.7 million on glamour photos for its cabinet ministers.
Shameful.
And just yesterday had the nerve to ask Parliament for an additional $11 million for partisan TV ads, and we've all seen enough of those.
Bad
But when it
priorities.
comes to stomping out child pornography, it's all about budget cuts. So how can the government continue to make these kinds of talks and sayings about what is important and what isn't? Their priorities clearly are not the priorities.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I wholeheartedly reject the premise of that question. Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is that we have not cut anything. We have actually increased funding to our security agencies by 1/3. With respect to this particular Child Exploitation Coordination Centre, there has been difficulty retaining and recruiting individuals to work in this field. If you can imagine for a moment the horrific scenes that officers have to weed through. I talked about it a moment ago, 200 million images, Mr. Speaker. That is the issue, and the Liberal member knows full well.
The Honourable Member for Ottawa South.
Except it's not true, Mr. Speaker. The facts contradict the Conservatives when they claim they take crime seriously. They cut funding to the RCMP to fight against child pornography by $10 million. In contrast, since they came to power, they have spent $750 million for partisan advertising. Their ministers have spent over $2.3 million for photographs of themselves. This is obscene, Mr. Speaker. When will this government make protection of our youth a true priority?
Honourable Secretary Parliamentary.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, it is our government that brought new, tough sentences for child exploitation. It is our government that ended the ability of child molesters to get criminal record suspensions. And it is this government, this Conservative government, that introduced the Tougher Penalties for Child Predators Act. Canadians listening today will not be fooled by the opposition parties. They know that it is only this government that is going to protect the interests of our children and protect the interests of this country, and it is this government that is protecting our national security as well. Hear, hear.
Honourable Member for Cape Breton-Canso.
Mr. Speaker, American basketball fans are getting excited about another annual March Madness, while here in Canada, taxpayers ready themselves for another round of March Sadness. That's the sad practice of Conservative ministers shoveling money to their party pals for little or no work. Like the March 2013 contract the finance minister dished to Guy Giorno, the party's legal advisor who was paid $5,000 for a 2,000-word speech that was never, ever read. The department said the speech broke the rules. Why are taxpayers on the hook for this blatant Conservative patronage?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I said the other day, that's just simply not true. But, Mr. Speaker, I suspect that Canadians and I know Ontarians are quite nervous about the approaching Ontario Liberal budget, which will, with the support of the Liberals here, introduce a carbon tax, which will cost all Canadians more money, Mr. Speaker, which will introduce a payroll tax, which will kill business and job investment, Mr. Speaker. On the opposite token, Mr. Speaker, we have a finance minister here who's going to be introducing a budget very soon, which will include a balanced budget, which will reconfirm the investments that we've made in the armed forces, which will reconfirm the fact that we're putting more money in the pockets of every single Canadian family. That's good news for families and good.
Order. The honourable member for Nickel Belt.
Mr. Speaker, the Prospectors and Developers Association of Canada is holding its annual convention in Toronto in a few days' time. The Conservatives' record on the mining sector is pretty dismal. The government's dragging its feet on the ring of fire, and no one knows whether the tax credit for junior mining companies will be renewed. Why won't the government give the mining sector long-term, predictable support?
Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, mining is a global industry, and our government is committed to attracting investment, opening new markets, supporting innovation, improving regulatory effectiveness, and promoting corporate social responsibility. That's why we are continuing to lower taxes, reduce red tape, open new markets, and create the conditions for companies, particularly those in the extractive sector, to succeed in Canada. Canada has the lowest overall tax rate on new business investments in the G7, giving us a distinct advantage in the extractive sector. We will continue to build on this action.
Member for Nickel Belt.
Every year, the government leaves a decision to extend the mineral exploration tax credit to the last minute. The budget delay means added uncertainty for the whole mining sector and lower investment in Canada. 25,000 people from 100 countries are meeting in Toronto in just over a week, and all of them are waiting to know if the government will extend the tax credit that is set to expire at the end of March. When will the government actually give the mining sector the predictability that they need to make investment and create jobs in Canada?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, as I've said, we are continuing to lower taxes, reduce red tape, open new markets, and create the conditions for companies, particularly those in the extractive sector. We want to see them succeed here in Canada. As I've said, we have the lowest overall tax rate on new business investments in the G7. That gives us a distinct advantage in the extractive sector, and we will continue to build on these actions.
Not have an update on
The honourable member for Manicouagan. Another area that's paying the price for Conservative mismanagement is education. The Assembly of First Nations of Quebec and Labrador has now turned to the Auditor General to move things forward. Yesterday they submitted a hefty file exposing the mismanagement at Aboriginal Affairs. Why isn't the minister answering the calls from Aboriginal communities who basically just want what everybody else wants, a decent education for their kids? Minister of Aboriginal Affairs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our government is of the view that First Nations students, as other Canadian students, deserve to have a high-quality education, and that is why since 2006 our government has invested more than $10 billion in basic and secondary, primary and secondary education for the First Nations students on reserve. We've invested $1.7 billion in school infrastructure, and all that money is for the purpose of giving First Nations kids access to a good education system.
They can fool some of the people some of the time, but they can't fool all of the people all of the time with their rhetoric. Mr. Speaker, many First Nation communities face underfunding and lack of training when it comes to fire and emergency services. Communities across the country are without fire protection and dependent on the neighbouring towns. These communities experience major response time, delays that can have devastating and tragic impacts. Mr. Speaker, will the minister recognize this crisis and work with these communities so they get the protection they need and deserve, or will the government continue to turn a blind eye and continue to put people at risk?
The Honourable Minister of Aboriginal Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is that indeed the government is working cooperatively and in partnership with First Nations throughout Canada in order to allow them to provide fire protection on reserve. The budgets are constant and going up throughout Canada. We've invested since 2006 over $185 million to support these services on reserve, and we will continue to work in partnership with those First Nations to continue in the same direction.
The member for New Brunswick Southwest.
Mr. Speaker, Canada's natural resource sector supports an impressive 1.8 million good-paying jobs. It accounts for nearly 20% of our economy and provides government tax revenue for important services like health, education, and infrastructure. Residents in my riding expect our government to create jobs and grow our economy while, of course, protecting the environment. Indeed, most are eager to see more oil and pipeline development in New Brunswick. Can the minister share with this House what we are doing to provide benefits for working Canadians?
The Honourable Minister of Aboriginal Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for this important question. As he said, Canadians expect our government to make decisions based on science and fact. That is why we resort to independent scientific opinion before deciding on the Energy East project. The Liberal leader jumped to the conclusion that this pipeline would be socially irresponsible. But our decisions will be based on scientific data and not ideology.
Mr. Speaker, you will know Canadian beef exports to South Korea are worth $25.8 million annually. The Canada-Korea Free Trade Agreement was supposed to increase the beef trade with South Korea, but the latest BSE discovery has now put a halt to these exports. And other trading partners may soon follow suit if information and reassurances aren't provided. What steps is the minister taking to protect our existing beef exports, and when will Canadian farmers be able to expect to resume their beef exports to Korea?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, the World Organization for Animal Health recognizes Canada as a controlled risk status country. We expect our trading partners to continue to recognize this status. South Korea, in particular, has followed our bilateral trading protocol and used Canada's strong control system. The government is working to fix this temporary trade disruption as soon as possible.
Compton-Stanstead.
The Honourable Member for Compton-Stanstead. Mr. Speaker, free trade deals in and of themselves don't improve our balance of trade. The deal with Korea, for example, hasn't stopped Korea from banning our beef after one case of mad cow was discovered. And yet other countries are still accepting our beef. What's the government's plan to reassure Korean consumers? And what's the minister going to do to help our beef farmers, whom he promised better access to the Korean market? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Trade.
Korea has followed our bilateral trading protocol and used Canada's strong control system. The government is working to fix this temporary trade disruption as soon as possible.
Honourable Member for Northwest Territories.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives' drastic cuts to Parks Canada have forced parks to scale back or shut their gates for winter. And now volunteers are needed to keep many of Canada's national parks open. $800 million investment in parks can produce $5 billion in economic activity, supporting local jobs and communities. Parks like Wood Buffalo need strong support, especially to increase tourism. Why are the Conservatives abandoning Canada's national parks?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I stated yesterday, there have been no reductions to Parks Canada budget. In fact, the overall budget has increased by 26%, and this is in addition to the $391 million we announced in Economic Action Plan 2014 to maintain and upgrade Parks Canada's infrastructure. And these investments will ensure that Canadians and visitors are safe and continue to enjoy our country's natural heritage. Our government also launched the National Conservation Plan last year, which includes new investments. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Temiskaming. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives' incompetence and flip-flopping on the approval of citronella have adversely affected our economy. A Quebec company has lost over $1 million and employees were laid off. The company even had to refund its customers and pay fines. Today, the whole industry needs rebuilding. It's pretty slapdash. How does the minister explain this situation? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, our government's committed to ensuring that Canadians have an access to a wide array of choice for natural health products, and Health Canada's oversight recognizes the lower risk of most natural health products. The department has approved thousands of products as being safe and effective. Regarding citronella, the department has announced a review to ensure that these products have the proper level of oversight, and this review will ensure that Canadians have access to safe and effective products.
The Honourable Member for Etobicoke North.
Mr. Speaker, as the 4th anniversary of the Syria crisis approaches, 5.6 million children are in need of assistance. Will the Minister of International Development personally attend the donor conference in Kuwait on March 31st? And will he make a meaningful contribution on behalf of all Canadians to champion the children of Syria?
The Honourable Minister for International Development.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my colleague for that question, and indeed the conference is coming up in March in Kuwait. We are still in consideration of whether or not the minister is going to attend that, but I can tell the House that Canada has been one of the largest donors. We are the 3rd largest donor to the World Food Program, and helping the people of Syria and helping the people who are most vulnerable. We will continue to assess the situation with our allies and continue to work with our partners.
Well done. Honourable Member for Mount Royal.
Mr. Speaker, the cruel and inhumane treatment of Saudi blogger Raif Badawi continue to arouse indignation in Canada and abroad. The government has called for clemency, but a mere call for clemency doesn't guarantee the immediate and unconditional release of Raif Badawi and his lawyer, nor does it reunite Raif with his family in Quebec. Will the government officially demand the release of these two men, a stay of prosecution, and Raif's reunification with his family here in Quebec? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the Canadian government considers the punishment of Mr. Badawi to be a violation of human dignity, and we continue to call for clemency in this case. The promotion and protection of human rights is an integral part of our Canadian foreign policy. Mr. Badawi is not a Canadian citizen, but we will continue to make our position known both publicly and through diplomatic channels. Our government has made representation, and we will continue to do that.
The Honourable Member for Gaspésie, Île-de-la-Madeleine. Via Rail is caught in a vicious circle. Because of bad service, there are fewer and fewer passengers. And the fewer the passengers, the less the service offering. In the East, the equipment and service are pathetic. Parliament has to regain control over this essential service by imposing a governance and funding formula on Via Rail, like they do in the U.S. with Amtrak. Will the Conservatives support my bill? Why are they treating passengers like second-class citizens? The Honourable Minister of Transport.
Via Rail's primary objective is to provide safe and efficient passenger service, but they also have to do it by making sure they do it in a cost-effective manner as possible. This government has supported Via Rail significantly since 2006. In fact, $1 billion in investment has gone into this passenger rail service. We always ask Via Rail how they plan on increasing ridership and how they plan on improving service. That's their job to get it done, and we expect them to do so.
Now, a member for Acadie-Bathurst. The New Brunswick Court of Appeal is made up of 6 judges. There are currently 3 Anglophones and 2 Francophones. The Association of French-speaking lawyers in New Brunswick is reasonably demanding that the next judge be a Francophone so that both communities are fairly represented on the bench. Will the minister commit to appointing an Acadian to the New Brunswick Court of Appeal and not to dip into the list of Conservative organizers like they did with Justice Richard Bell? The Honourable Justice Minister. Mr. Speaker, the member understands full well that we need to have an impartial judiciary, but in each case, the appointments are based on merit, and we are content to continue with that criterion. We are confident in the competence of the bench in New Brunswick, as all across the country.
Mr. Speaker, we have an important opportunity to build on our record of responsible resource development while this securing long-term prosperity for all Canadians, which I think is particularly important for the people in my riding of McLeod. This is why our government is taking action to ensure that we benefit from the economic potential of our natural resources. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources update this House on the Prime Minister's exciting announcement yesterday?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for McLeod for that question. Countries around the world are looking to do business with Canada because we offer the best fiscal conditions for secure energy supply. Yesterday's announcement by the Prime Minister reaffirmed our government's commitment to promote Canada's resources on the world stage through the capital cost allowance for the emerging LNG industry. In contrast to the high tax and spend agenda of the Liberals and NDP, our low tax plan is delivering results for Canadians by creating jobs and economic growth from coast to coast to coast.
Mr. Gander, Grand Falls, Windsor.
Mr. Speaker, over the coming weeks, there are about to be severe cuts to the shrimp fishery in northeastern Newfoundland and Labrador for the entire province. This coming Monday, there is a large protest scheduled by citizens on Fogo Island. Specifically, they're going after the last-in, first-out policy. Now, recently, the provincial government, their fellow Conservatives, have said if this policy exists, then the inshore fishery will be devastated. So my question to the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans, finally, will she eliminate last-in, first-out policy and save our inshore fishery?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate my colleagues' interest in this issue. I can tell him that the Minister is committed to balancing economic opportunity while promoting the sustainability of the northern shrimp fishery. Reductions to quotas are never easy, but our priority has to be sustainability. The last-in, first-out policy has been part of this fishery since 1997, when it was introduced by the Liberal government. And under that policy, the new entrants received the vast majority of the new access, with the understanding that if reductions were necessary in the future, that the LIFO policy would be in effect. It's our view that the terms agreed to previously need to be respected. Thank you.
Edmonton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Quebec government confirmed that the St. Anne Veterans Hospital transfer is 100% ready to go and will be transferred at the beginning of 2016. The Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Veterans Affairs, please update the House on the status of this project.
Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member from Edmonton Centre for his personal commitment to our veterans. Mr. Speaker, our government continues to work diligently with the Government of Quebec towards a successful transfer of St. Anne de Bellevue Veterans Hospital while maintaining excellence in care for veterans in the language of their choice. Contrary to what the member for Lac St. Louis and his federal Liberal Party claims, our government is standing up for veterans and delivering tangible results. Veterans can count on our government to ensure our veterans have the best care available and continue to support our veterans in every capacity. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Jonquière-Alma. Mr. Speaker, while the current Quebec government is making bad decisions and to the detriment of the regions in the name of balancing the books, the fiscal imbalance between Ottawa and the provinces keeps getting bigger. Between 2009 and 2013, Quebec lost $6.5 billion in transfers. Will the government stop balancing the books at Quebec's expense and restore transfers based on the needs of the population? Mr. Speaker, we are protecting provincial transfers while the need for social programs continue to increase. The Liberals radically slashed transfers to the provinces and territories. We will never do that. We will ensure that all provinces and territories have the capacity to provide healthcare, education, and other social services that families need.
Edmonton, St. Albert.
Mr. Speaker, Maria Venancio was a Filipino temporary foreign worker who worked at a McDonald's restaurant in Edmonton. In 2011, Ms. Venancio was biking to work and was struck by a motor vehicle, rendering her a paraplegic and therefore unable to work. Now, under the rules of the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, as she is unable to work, she has no status and is currently facing deportation. Ms. Venancio has applied to become a permanent resident, but deporting her to the Philippines while she is convalescent would seem to be inhumane and even un-Canadian. Will either the Minister of Immigration or the Minister in charge of Border Services intervene to protect an extremely vulnerable temporary foreign worker?
The Honourable Parliament Secretary, Minister of Citizenship and Immigration.
Mr. Speaker, the member will know that because of privacy laws, I cannot speak to the specifics of this particular case. I will state this, Mr. Speaker. Canada has one of the most fair and generous immigration systems in the world. With that said, we must ensure that we continue to welcome newcomers while respecting Canadian taxpayers at all times. Thank you.
St. Albert.
Speaker, the government claims to be cracking down on terrorists, and through Bill C-51, our security agencies are about to assume broad new powers. However, our security agencies lack the resources to carry out even their current mandates. Both the RCMP Commissioner and the Deputy CSIS Director clearly told parliamentary committees last October as much, that a lack of resources makes tracking all extremists at all times simply impossible. Now we have learned that collectively, CSIS, the RCMP and the Department of Defense have allowed $11 billion to go unspent and lapse. In its zeal to balance its budget in an election year, does the government not understand that increased security powers without adequate resources is an exercise in futility?
The Honourable Parliament Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In actual fact, we have increased resources to our national security agencies by over 1/3. Mr. Speaker, just recently this last week, we experienced more terror in the world in Copenhagen. We've seen attacks also in Australia, recently in Paris, and of course here on October the 22nd. It is absolutely imperative that when we talk about legislation that's before this House, that we pass it, and to enable that we give the resources and the tools to our security agencies in order to keep our national security and our citizens safe.
Here, here. We now have an update to Richmond, Arthabaska.
The member for Richmond, Arthabaska. Mr. Speaker, the government rightly decided to appeal the decision about wearing a veil during citizenship ceremonies. The Conservative government, the Conservative Party even started a petition against this. A few months from the next election, the Elections Act does not ban veiled voting, and yet voting is surely at least as important as taking the oath. Is the government going to keep its promise in the 2007 throne speech and the two bills it subsequently tabled and reassert that veiled voting isn't the way it's done around here? The Honourable Minister. The Election Fairness Act requires all voters to submit a piece of ID before they vote. As far as I recall, the Bloc Québécois opposed that requirement and that bill. So it's kind of interesting that they want people to show their face without having to show any ID to prove who they are. So we'll have to... The Bloc should start reading and remembering its own positions.
Tabling of documents, dépôt de documents. Introduction of government bills. Ms. Raitt, seconded by Ms. Rempel, moves for leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Canada Transportation Act and the Railway Safety Act. This motion is deemed adopted. Madame Raitt, appuyée par Madame Rempel, proposed.
Ms. Raitt, seconded by Ms. Rempel, moves that this bill be now read and printed. This bill is deemed adopted.
When shall the bill be read a second time? At the next sitting of the House. Déclaration des ministres.
Statements by ministers.
Delegations. Presenting reports from committees. Dépôt de projet de loi.
Introduction of private members' bills.
First reading of Senate public bills. Motions. Motion. Presenting petitions. Présentation des pétitions. The Honourable Member for Mount Royal.
I'd like to table a petition signed by many Canadians in the Sherbrooke region. The petitioners call upon the Government of Canada to immediately use all diplomatic means necessary in order to ensure that Raif Badawi be freed and reunited with his family as soon as possible who live in Quebec. He has been sentenced to 10 years of prisons and 1,000 lashes because of his online activities in Egypt. Many members of Parliament have already called upon the government to act. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Gaspésie-La Madeleine. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have the honour today to table a petition signed by hundreds of people